Hello and welcome to NEOhioLife Spotlight. I'm here with Justin Hilton, the man of many hats. How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Good.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. So for our audience, can you let them know what you're doing and who you are at this point in your life?
Yeah, so I'm Justin Hilton. As you said, thank you so much for having me. I am the president and CEO of Leadership Akron currently. So I've been in this seat for about, I'm working on my third year as the president and CEO there. And just am really thrilled and honored to be part of this organization, which has a 40-plus history within the Akron community.
Right. So Leadership Akron, so why don't we just start off with what is your definition of leadership?
What is my definition of leadership? I would say the short of it would just be intentional influence.
Intentional influence, right. What is your vision and goals for Akron leadership?
I would say I personally believe that leadership matters, right? So I start there in terms of a fundamental base. And I truly believe that everyone is a leader, right? So, and you know, leadership development is probably $1 trillion industry across the entire world. You know, the Stephen Coveys, the blah, blah, blah. And there can be rhetoric out there that thinks that, you know, not everyone is born a leader, or some people think that it's nature versus nurture. Are you born a leader? Are you not born a leader? Can you become a leader, be developed into a leader, blah, 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 blah. If leadership matters and leadership is about intentional influence, then I believe everyone is a leader, right? In any capacity, we lead. Whether you're leading within your home, whether you're leading within your community, whether you're leading on your job, blah, 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 blah. And so my vision for Akron is that we have leaders that continue to lead the best that they possibly can, because you can't have a strong community if you don't have strong leaders leading within that community. And so, again, I feel very honored and humbled and blessed to be head of an organization that deals with leaders and immerses them in the community in which they live, work, play, and stay.
Right. What leadership qualities do you believe is essential for driving the success of an organization in today's business landscape?
I think, to be honest, the notion of selflessness is one of the most important for me. And wow, I mean, if you just think about our nation, the political landscape, thinking about the things that are happening across the ethnic and racial lines, all of those kinds of things, it's challenging to balance the duality of living life on your own terms and pursuing your own dreams, your own goals, all those kinds of things, while at the same time juxtaposing that to the reality that we are, in fact, our neighbor's keeper, right? That the decisions that I make not only affect myself and my life and those in my sphere of influence, but they also affect my neighbor. They also affect multiple generations. They also affect my coworkers. They also affect people that I may mentor. They also affect customers, clients, et cetera. And so always trying to balance the reality that it is about me, but it's not about me is key for me as a leader. You have to lead with almost a selfishness, but at the same time, you have to lead with a selflessness. And balancing that duality, I think, is absolutely crucial for effective leadership.
Right. So tell us about your past and how you ended up here.
Well, do we have 4 hours, 5, 6, 7 months? So my path is a very circuitous one. I started out as a kid that just loved art, and I was the class clown in high school, so I was just this funny little artist, quirky kid, and because I didn't really understand, life at that point and how to be really intentional and strategic about how you go through life, I just decided I wanted to pursue art. And people in my life at that time were like, yeah, so there's no money in that. So it shifted to architecture. right? And so, so all three of my degrees that I got from Kent State University in a 6-year stretch were all in architecture. I worked here in Northeast Ohio for Robert P. Madison International for 10 years. And so that was the start of my professional career, and I was blessed to be able to work in that industry for what I call like a Cleveland Renaissance. So it was during the 90s. So I got to work on, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Great Lakes Science Center, all of the arenas for the Browns, the Cavs, the Indians at that time, Cleveland Hopkins International Airport, downtown Cleveland Public Library, downtown jail, RTA, all of those projects that were going on in the 90s here in Cleveland, I got a chance to work on from an architectural standpoint. And then I was asked to come back to Kent State to teach in the College of Architecture. So I returned back to my alma mater. I taught for 7 years. And then I left the professoriate and started to work in the administrative side of higher education. And despite my intent to only be there for just a few years, I did a 20-year career at Kent State in multiple different job capacities. And then when COVID hit, a lot of things changed. As we all know, the world changed. And so I left Kent State after 20 years, and I went to the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. And so I did global project management for Goodyear for a year. And after that, I transitioned over to Leadership Akron to become the president and CEO. So it's been a very circuitous route, over 35 years or close to 35 years of work. And within those decades, I also had multiple different businesses, multiple other income streams that I was navigating at the same time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
yeah.
What is one of the biggest failures or setbacks that you've encountered, and how did you bounce back from it?
Wow, one of the biggest failures. So there's so many, but I believe failure is essential. I believe that failure is a gift, and I believe if you're living life right, that you fail quickly, and you move on to your next failure as fast as you can, right? Because whenever you quote unquote fail, all that really means is something didn't work in the way in which you expected or thought that it would work, and it becomes a learning opportunity, right? So, and I think one of the gifts of failure is you become hyper focused on why it didn't work. And so you learn faster. If you do something right and it works, oftentimes you don't fully understand what you did right because you move past it. It worked. You don't have to take a critical lens to see why it didn't work. So failures is huge. I think my biggest failure was probably when I was in the real estate industry. And so I had multiple real estate properties, and this is way before Airbnbs and Verbos and all that other kind of stuff. So you basically were acquiring properties, you were flipping them, or holding on to them for the rental income, all that kind of stuff. So I had multiple properties. I think I had 5 properties, a triplex, a duplex, 3 single-family houses, et cetera. And I struggled in that I made some revenue, but I ended up having to liquidate that asset portfolio actually right before the housing market crash and all that other kind of stuff. So that was hard for me, and I think the one thing that I learned out of that became part of my transferable skill portfolio, I guess you could say, of skills was that, one, you have to kind of live life from the end to the beginning and not from the beginning to the end, right? It's kind of like how you're supposed to play golf. You're supposed to play golf from the green back to the tee instead of from the tee to the green, which is how you would typically think to do it. And so it's making sure you have an end in mind that for tomorrow that your today is aligning you for. And so I didn't really have an end plan for real estate when I got into it. I just got into it. I thought I could cash flow some things, et cetera, et cetera. I didn't really have a plan. And so my decisions and my efforts weren't pushing me towards the plan that I should have had in place and the end goal. And the other thing that I learned out of that is to make sure that you have a team of people around you that you can bounce ideas off of, that you can get advice from, that can help put you in touch with some of the expertise to fill some blind spots that you have, all those kinds of things. I was kind of doing it on my own as a maverick, and so those are, I think, the two most important things I learned through that failure.
Wow. So you're a man with a lot of knowledge. What one piece of advice would you give someone who's starting or wanting to start their business today?
Oh, one piece of advice. It would probably be always understand, to the degree that you can, how the decision you're going to make today affects the big picture, right? I got that piece of advice decades ago, and I remember at the time thinking that kind of makes sense, but I then thought, well, that insinuates that there needs to be a big picture, right? So again, that goes back to the lesson I learned, in that real estate failure, which clearly I didn't take the advice that I was given before that, or else I probably wouldn't have failed so miserably in that particular effort. But it's this idea that the decisions that you make today should and will affect what happens tomorrow. So you got to understand what the big picture is so that you understand how the decision you're making today will affect that big picture.
Wow. How does one maintain work-life balance, especially as their business grows?
I would say probably you should probably start by not even believing that there's such a thing, right? I don't believe in balance. I believe in rhythm. Balance almost presupposes that we can kind of hold it all together in some sense of equity, and I don't think life is that way, because there are times in life where we're hyper intentional, or like you have a baby and all of a sudden you're out on FMLA for 3 months, and so you might not be working. So all of the weight of work is just gone, right? So that would throw things out of balance. But if you believe in balance, if you don't believe in balance, what that does is it just changes the rhythm of your life. And so that's what I believe in is a rhythm for your present, and whatever is on your plate and whatever is in your present, you have to figure out what place they need to take in your prioritization of your time, because we only get 24 hours in a day, right? So what are we giving time to, and what are we committed to in those seasons, and what kind of rhythm does that create for us? And then, however long that lasts, we might find ourselves in a different season, whether it's COVID, whether it's family, whether it's a job change, whether it's a promotion, there's so many things that go into it, let alone, maybe having to care for an older, aging parent, right, or all of those kinds of things can show up and compete for time on your plate that would, in theory, throw things out of balance, but it doesn't throw it out of balance, it just changes the rhythm. And so the difficult thing there is everybody has their own rhythm, just like there's a resonating frequency that exists for all of us that's different. And so I don't believe in balance, I believe in rhythm, and achieving that rhythm, I don't think there's a set formula. I just believe there has to be a hyper intentionality that you look at for how you prioritize the things that are in your life at that time.
Looking back, is there anything that you would do different in your journey?
Nah, maybe fail faster. No, I have had a truly blessed life. I believe that we don't choose to exist, right? So I don't believe that I chose to be born. I didn't choose to be, descendants of slaves in America, which I am. I didn't choose my parents' socioeconomic level, which determined what was in my life, right? I didn't choose, what school system I attended. Like all of these things that affected who I became as a young child, I didn't choose any of it. Right. I don't even believe I choose to wake up. I believe that's a gift from God. I choose to get up, and then I choose to make 35,000 conscious decisions in a day, but my life doesn't even begin in a daily basis with my own conscious choice. And so because of that, I believe that my life is all about what am I stewarding, right? If I didn't choose all these things, but they're here, how do I steward them to the best of my ability? And for me, that stewardship journey started when I was about, seriously, it started when I was about 20 years old. And so I became hyper intentional about the kind of life that I wanted to create when I was 20 years old. And so I don't know that I would change anything because I did a lot of living in the last 30 some odd years because I was just being very, very intentional about the dreams and goals that I wanted to accomplish in life.
What were those intentional?
So that's a great question. So that architect that I told you that I worked for here in Cleveland, I met him. Robert Prince Madison is his name. He's still with us. I think he's 102 now.
Wow.
I met him when I was 18 years old. So I wanted to be, I wanted to be a black architect. And how dare I have the audacity to become something that I didn't see, right? But when I was 18, I met him. So I saw what was possible. And it was him that sort of unlocked this reality for me that there was this possibility to actually become something that you could dare to dream, right? Mm-hmm. So that was a really, really important moment for me because up until then, I was just a product of my context. So, my parents were not college educated. They just worked jobs. So when you think of all the ways in which you can create revenue or cash flow or income, a job is just one of those ways. But I didn't know any other way because that's all that I saw was a job, right? So now I meet Robert Madison. He's an entrepreneur. He's a business owner. So now I'm saying, oh, there's another way you can own a business, right? And so he unlocked, I think, the possibility of my thinking. 2 years later, because I worked for him for 2 years as an intern, 2 years later, I'm in Italy, living over there, studying architecture, and I had this moment of realization which caused me to ask the question, out of everything that can be designed, what's the most important thing to design, right? Is it a cathedral? Is it a hospital? Is it a museum? What is it? And the answer was, for me, was the most important thing to design is a life. Not a typology of architecture, but a life. Right. And so the question then was, what kind of life do I want to design for myself? And one of the answers for that was the intent for me to create what I called 100 wants, needs, desires, dreams, and goals. So I had this list that I started writing with the goal to create 100 dreams and goals that I wanted to achieve in life, right? So I started that when I was 20 years old because I was over there in Italy. And so what unfolded over the next, decades were things that I wrote on that list when I was 20 years old. So not only all of the businesses that I've done, but, recording artist, movie producer, model, speaker, like all of these things were on that list because I just was daring to dream them. And when I wrote them down, I don't know that I really believed that I would accomplish them or how I would accomplish them, but the intent was just to write them down. And so as a result of that, I think that created sort of a gravity to the decisions that I made and the intentionality that I was living life with, and I accomplished, quite a few of them.
That's incredible. It's very inspiring. Now, in your current role with Leadership Akron, how do you approach building and maintaining a strong organizational culture? And why is it important for team success?
So the number one thing I try to do is, I actually created a term that I don't know that it really exists and I haven't trademarked it, but I do that, right?
Yeah.
I created a term called lovership.
Lovership?
Lovership. I think lovership is more important than leadership, because what lovership means is that I genuinely care about your well-being. And so that's the number one thing that I try and create within the culture of not just, the organization, but anybody that I engage. I want them to truly feel, number one, and then secondarily, believe and tertiarily know that I actually care for them and I'm concerned about their well-being. So that's the number one thing, and I just call that lovership because it feels good. If I'm able to do that successfully, that's the most important thing. I think we all have been in situations where we've had to follow a leader, right? But what if that leader doesn't actually care about us, right?
Right.
We're just there to do a job. The yield of our job, contributes to the bottom line or the revenue or whatever. And you're just there to do a job. Your boss is your leader. But if they don't really care for you, how willing are you to go above and beyond when necessary? Or do you just do your job at the level you do it because you don't really have a relationship with your leader? And so I believe if we create cultures and we create relationships in which we truly care for someone, they'll not only do their jobs, they'll do more, right? Because they feel valued and they feel cared about. And so that's the number one thing I try and create in terms of a culture within my organization. And I think the degree to which we can duplicate that outside of jobs and work and those things into if we can allow it to permeate every aspect of our lives, then I think the world becomes better because we actually just show care and concern for each other.
Right. Beautiful. It sounds like you've pivoted a few times in your life, made some big decisions.
Yeah.
On change. What advice would you give someone who's in position and possibly making a big change for themselves right now?
Well, I will say, be intentional about creating time and space to be quiet and still and try and hear what might be being said or communicated to you. And so for me, those moments, there have been several, but those moments have come where I've been intentional about creating silence and solitude, where I can just block out the noise of life, block out the pace of life, all the to-dos, all of that stuff. Just get quiet. And for me in those moments, God has been able to speak to me and I've been able to hear him. But for those that might not have a faith-based aspect to their life or might not have a relationship with their Creator in that way, just to create that silence and solitude and just hear your own thoughts. Invite yourself into a space where you can hear your own answers to questions like, who do I want to become? What impact do I want to make? Like, give yourself the gift of those questions and be quiet enough to listen to what your heart might be saying, or what your mind might be saying, or what your soul might be saying, or what your creator might be saying, instead of what the world is saying, instead of what the naysayers are saying, like all of that stuff. Give yourself the gift of silence and solitude. Ask important questions that are purposeful and listen for what the response is. That to me, that's the greatest gift that I think we can give ourselves. And I would highly recommend that for anyone that's contemplating a change, a pivot, a next ... for their life.
Right. Go into some silence so they can hear what's really being told to them, right? That's beautiful. As we wrap up, tell us, what should people know about Leadership Akron, and what do you see for the future?
So I think what people should know about Leadership Akron is that we are the premier leadership organization within the Greater Akron area that has created an immersive experience for leaders within our community, so that they can fully understand the community in which, as I mentioned, they live, work, serve, stay, and play in. It's hard to lead what you're not aware of, right? So we hyper immerse them into this community so that they're more knowledgeable, they're more aware, they're equipped, they're empowered, they're impassioned in such a way where they can leverage the skills that they have to help us change and become the best community that we can dare to imagine. And so we have about 10 leadership programs that we do throughout a given year. We touch about 200 leaders within those programs. And because we've been doing it for over 40 years, we have a couple thousand alumni. And our leadership programs are designed for, on the youngest level, high school juniors, all the way up through those who have recently retired. So we span about 55 years from our youngest leadership participant to our most seasoned. And I would just say, reach out to us, leadershipakron.org, if you're interested in the programs that we create. And get involved and get engaged and figure out how we can make your impact within our community that much more valuable.
Great, thank you. And before we go, what do you see for the future?
So I think for me, I see a future where our community becomes literally the beloved community, right? In which we care for each other, we're concerned about everybody's well-being, and we figure out ways to come together instead of ways to separate and be divided. Right. And I think the degree to which we'll do that is the degree to which our community will be great.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for
Absolutely.
joining us.
Sure.
Again, Justin Hilton with Leadership Akron, and it's great to have you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.